and welcome back to the Elder Watch miniseries, Less Common Scams of 2024. My name's Jessica Zawatsky. I am the program specialist for Elder Watch, and today we're going to be talking about psychic scams. Elder Watch is a 20-plus year collaboration between AARP and the Colorado Attorney General's Office. We seek to protect and support older Coloradans by providing education and outreach throughout the state related to fraud and financial literacy. We also have a volunteer-staffed fraud victim support helpline should you or someone you know be the victim of a scam or fraud. Whether that's a psychic scam or not, go ahead and give us a call. Our phone number is 800-222-4444. Select option 2. All right, so today we'll be talking about psychic scams. The first thing we'll talk about is, why are we talking about psychic scams? What's the impact on people? Why is this something that it's important to know about? After that, we'll talk about some of the red flags that you might see within a psychic scam. After that, we'll go through some real life examples from the Elder Watch helpline of psychic scams and kind of identify those red flags in those real life stories. After that, we'll talk about clone and imposter accounts, which don't only apply to psychic scams, but they can be particularly nefarious in this particular type of scam. And then lastly, we'll end with what to do if you experience a psychic scam. This Elder Watch series, Less Common Scams, is covering scams that don't usually make our top 10 in terms of frequency of reports. These scams tend to get a little less attention than some of those highly prevalent scams like romance scams or crypto scams, but that doesn't mean that they're not detrimental to those who experience them. And I think that if we're not talking about them, it makes it even easier for the scammers to operate. So that's kind of why I care about doing this Less Common Scams presentation. But in terms of why psychic scams, one thing that we will say at Elder Watch from time to time is, what's your scam? And really that means what leaves you vulnerable. So for example, if you really love your grandkids, you post about them all the time, that might be kind of an in for a scammer. If, like me, you really love plants and animals and music, I might fall to a pop-up ad, for example, for a rare philodendron that I don't have. So I think that talking about psychic scams might not apply to everyone, but it might apply to some people. And it's important to know if you're dealing with a fake psychic and to kind of know what you should look out for. So that's the first one. The second one is that psychic scams, like other types of scams, I'm specifically thinking romance and natural disaster scams, they target people who are vulnerable. Now, I don't want to say always, but often we're searching for something, maybe we're grieving, maybe we feel lost, and that's why we're going to look for some outside perspective. So psychic scammers know that, and so they might specifically, and we'll talk about some of the red flags, but they might specifically approach someone who, for example, they saw had just lost a spouse in an obituary, not unheard of. And then lastly, like many other scams, there's a potential for huge losses when it comes to psychic scams. Often they are a more longer term relationship. And in that case, there might be a lot of different payments that are coming through. So if you don't know the red flags, if your spidey sense isn't activated, you could potentially lose huge amounts of money when it comes to psychic scams. So now that we've kind of talked about the why, let's get into the general archetypes, frameworks that we see in psychic scams here on the helpline. So in doing this presentation and in figuring out kind of some of these scam archetypes for psychic scams, I did listen to some psychics, and I also listened to things and talked to people in, for example, the Federal Trade Commission, the U.S. Postal Service, and they all kind of agree on this first one. So the first sign or the first red flag of a potential scam is that you are approached or choose to visit a psychic who reports that you either have a curse or a hex or something from your past life that you need to resolve now in this life. And specifically, I mean, somebody approaches you out of the blue. So maybe they send you an email, maybe they send you a Facebook message, maybe they walk up to you in person. Now, I did listen to, like I said, many different sources to build this presentation. And a psychic that was talking about psychic scams, she said that if you are a dentist, you don't walk up on the street to people and say, hey, your teeth look nasty. That's not how that works. Being a psychic is a gift, but it's also someone's livelihood. So if someone approaches you saying, hey, all of these things are wrong with you and only I can fix it, red flag, red flag. The second one is not uncommon for scams in general. We tend to see similar things often, for example, with like keto gummy and other supplements. And this is you pay for something like crystals or a book, and either after you pay for it, you never receive it, you're ghosted, you cannot get in touch with anybody from the company or that individual psychic. Alternatively, you might receive a knockoff version of that product. So let's say, I don't know, you expected to get a particular type of crystal, and then it turns out you just got like a piece of plastic that was painted. Red flag. The third archetype scam map that I want to put out there is a psychic who promises to make things happen that they would have no control over. So, for example, if a psychic tells you that they can cure cancer, I don't know about that one. That one might be a red flag. Now, I will say that, like all of the other presentations I do, only one of these things in certain cases may not mean it's a scam. But if you, for example, let's say you're approached by a stranger who tells you that they can solve everything for you and that they can heal your cancer, but you know you've never met this person before, that might be a little bit of a red flag. Now, the next one is a really big red flag, and it's a component of a lot of scams because it's what helps them be sustainable. It's what helps keep the scammers paid. And this is a sense of codependency and just real necessity in this relationship. So scammers will often work diligently to become a trusted person in your life without whom you feel like you can't survive. You can't solve your problems by yourself. So in this particular type of scam, this might result in extra visits, extra purchases, extra manipulation to really keep you, as we like to say, under the ether. And generally, these purchases, these amounts tend to increase as time goes on. So also a red flag of a scam. Another huge red flag is threats. So if you say to your practitioner that you want to stop services, or maybe you're not comfortable with purchasing a particular add-on, and they begin threatening you or say that they will curse you if you stop paying, they say that bad things will happen to you or your family members, scam, red flag, red flag. And lastly, an almost guaranteed scam is unsolicited communication. So kind of similar to that first one where like you are approached, but in this time, I'm talking about unsolicited communication, particularly like via the mail, like snail mail, that offers you blessing, protection, things like that. Now, these are not the only psychic scams that tend to be out there, but these are some of the more prevalent ones we see in this less common type of scam. Now that we know some of the general red flags for psychic scams, let's look at some real life cases that we've received here on the Elder Watch Helpline and see if we can find the red flags within. So in this first scam that we're going to talk about, the caller met someone online who claimed to be a psychic. This psychic, he claimed that he could cure all of the caller's problems if she just sent him $5,000, which he would then pray over and then send it back to her. The caller sent this individual $5,000 through Western Union. She realized it was a scam when she never got the money back, and essentially the psychic ghosted her. So from this scam, we see some of the red flags we talked about in the last slide, as well as some red flags for just scams in general. So the first one is hyperbolic claims, right? So this psychic says he can fix all of the problems in this woman's life if she just sends him $5,000. Now, she also sends it through him through an unconventional payment method, which is a common component of a lot of scams. So in this case, she sends it through Western Union. Now, though she wasn't supposed to be getting a product, like say a crystal or a book or a singing bowl or something like that, she was expecting to get something back. So in this one, we also see that red flag of after you've cut off communication, you never get the thing that you paid for, and you're unable to get in touch with the company, the individual who you were previously contacting. All right, let's look at another psychic scam. So in this one, the caller was contacted online by a psychic who said that they could predict his future. The caller responded that he wasn't interested in psychic services, and after rejecting the psychic's offer, the caller was sent distorted and scary photos of his daughter that had been manipulated by the psychic. The scammer told the caller that if he didn't pay $350, his daughter was going to die. Thankfully, in this case, the caller didn't provide any financial information. But I think this is a really great example, kind of before we get into the specific red flags, of the importance of internet safety. Because in this case, right, the individual posted photos of his daughter online, and the scammer was able to get them and manipulate them. So I just want to put out the reminder that once you put something on the internet, really anyone can get to it and they can use it in ways that you didn't expect. So let's look at some of the red flags here. In this call, we see one of those first red flags that we talked about, which is that the caller was approached. They did not solicit these services. Somebody slid into their messaging app and was contacting them in that way. So red flag number one, unsolicited, and you are approached by someone. The second one here is those threats, right? So when the caller rejects the services, which again, he did not ask for, the psychic becomes threatening and starts saying that his daughter is going to die. One thing that I do want to mention, if you embrace the world of psychics, is to beware of clone and imposter accounts. And specifically, I mean this online, like on Facebook, social media, TikTok, that kind of thing. So if you are reached out to directly by somebody, we already talked about how that's usually a red flag. It's not really a common thing that real psychics will do. But if that happens, or if maybe you reach out to a psychic on like TikTok or Instagram or something like that, you might want to check that there's not a clone or imposter account. So sometimes something that a scammer will do is, let's say that I'm a psychic and my psychic handle on Instagram is Jessie1. Now a scammer might take my same picture, all of my same posts, and they might make an account that says Jessie2 or Jessie36 or something like that. So if you are dealing with someone and you see extra accounts, or you thought they were a legitimate person, but now something suspect is happening, look in to see if you can find extra accounts that perhaps are an imposter account or a clone of this real practitioner's account. That's one way to stay safe out there, especially if you're doing psychic work and that kind of thing on an online platform. So as I've mentioned before, lots of scams use similar tactics, and what you should do following a scam tends to kind of be similar regardless of the type of scam it is. So the first thing that you should do is give us a call. We will definitely be here to hear your story, give you some resources, point you in the right direction, and offer that helping hand as you try to move on from this setback. So if you do experience a psychic scam, give us a phone call. Our phone number is 800-222-4444. Select option 2. The second thing you should do is report the fraudulent business to the Federal Trade Commission. And after that, if you met this particular person online or like on social media, you should report it to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is also called the IC3. Lastly, if the person in question that you met on social media, report them to that social media site in question so that hopefully they can't do this to other people. But then also, if it's one of those imposter accounts, it helps the real person, because now there's not these people, ruining their reputation, ruining their business. And then lastly, you should report, if you did end up paying someone, to the particular financial institution that you paid them through. Now, if you paid with debit card or an alternative payment method, the chances that you get your money back are pretty slim, but it's still a great thing to do, especially if now that psychic scammer has your personal and financial information. And that's a wrap for today. If you'd like to learn more about psychic scams, visit stopfraudcolorado.gov or aarp.org/money/scams-fraud. For all of us here at Elder Watch, my name is Jessica Zawadski. Thank you so much for joining me. Stay safe out there and don't hesitate to give us a call should you be the victim of a fraud or scam. I'll see you next time as I continue my less common scams of 2024 miniseries.